Hi, Without Diminishment subscribers, Alexander Brown back for another episode of our leadership series. I'm the co-founder of WD, managing editor, and today we're thrilled to be talking to Iain Black. Iain he wrote a great column for us. He's been a long-time WD subscriber. He's also been running a great campaign for BC Conservative leadership. He served under Gordon Campbell with the Vancouver Board of Trade, took a crack at the running federally in 2025, and now he's back with a strong campaign. Great young campaigners. And so I'm really looking forward to this chat. I hope you join us. And if you enjoy it too, like and subscribe. Iain Black joins the show. Iain's a business executive and former Gordon Campbell-era cabinet minister. He's running for the BC Conservative leadership. After leaving provincial politics, he served as the president and CEO of the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade. Later ran for the federal Conservatives in 2025 before re-entering provincial politics. Iain, welcome.
Thanks for having me here.
How's I know you're on the road right now. How's life on the campaign trail?
You know what? It's been exhilarating. It's fun. Whenever you get to, first of all, we live in a beautiful province, so whenever you get a chance to go to the remote corners, even when the snow is still firmly on the ground, and Fort St. John and Chetwynd and Mackenzie, I mean, it's great to get out and engage people. And it's a validating experience when you realize that some of the common challenges in the Lower Mainland are felt throughout the province.
Yeah.
And you feel the energy and the desire for change, a confidence in the fact that the BC Conservatives can get us there if we get an experienced leader to cross us over the finish line. So it's wonderfully validating, and it's been great fun.
I'm glad to hear that. And yeah, it's more than just the BC Lower Mainland. My wife and I, since moving out, any excuse to get on the road, to go up the Sunshine Coast, to head east, to head south, take advantage of the West's great geography, as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure you'd agree.
I do.
Iain, you have a recent article in Without Diminishment that paints a powerful picture of British Columbians feeling like strangers in our own province because hard work no longer delivers the BC dream. I know that's a message that resonates not on the left coast, but coast to coast. What has created this meaningful and dangerous chasm between everyday citizens and their government?
I think you've got a government in the NDP that's lost its touch. Number one, lost touch with the people. It's lost the plot, as my young adult children like to say. They've lost the plot, and there's this constant disconnect that you're seeing now between the economic realities and the ideology of typically an NDP government. But I think we've become complacent. I think, especially the generation 35 to 40-year-old, which I touch on in the article, down to the guys on my campaign team who they're recent university graduates, and they're looking around, they're kind of going like, whatever this is, it ain't working. And the 20 odd years working before I can get a down payment, as opposed to my parents who could buy a house after that time. And it just goes on and on from there. That we've given up our public spaces to criminals and untreated mental health and drug addiction, and the list goes on. But I think it reflects a little bit of the boiling of the frog a little. I think the whole reason that Without Diminishment exists is because there was this moment where everybody kind of stood back and went, we're all kind of going along on the stream here, and it's not okay. And we're very passive as Canadians with our politics. And I think you guys have been a wonderful lightning rod to stand back and go, just a minute, are we actually buying into this direction? Are we actually buying into accepting the same framework generationally that our parents and grandparents did? Because the opportunities they had are not the same. The economics are not the same. The geopolitical situation is not the same. And things have shifted dramatically. And I'm not sure that government is servicing the people and reflecting the needs of the people the way they did even 15, 20 years ago. And so we're at that neat little crossroads where people are stepping back and looking at it. And guys like me who have some experience at it are going, yep, you're right. And I know what we can do to fix it.
Yeah, and it's good to hear. And I'm glad you mentioned as well your campaign team, the age of your campaign team. I fall into that 35 to 40 demo that you mentioned off the top. But you have a really great group of young activists and volunteers. I see them out at the events, whether it's at UBC or downtown, and they're all going and they're all reading the right stuff. They're all interfaced with the right politics and sources and incredibly whip smart. And they all are just saying, we can all tell the kind of social contract is broken for the majority. One of the big concerns, of course, is the debt. You've warned that this millstone could triple. It would only add to what generations are feeling as a kind of betrayal. How can your 100-day plan, which you mentioned in your platform, help to stop the bleeding there and get BC back to fiscal sanity?
Well, one modest correction, if I may, on the question. It's not that the debt could triple. It has tripled
Right.
by the government's own estimations. They inherited a debt of about 66 odd billion dollars, and given the province is 160 odd years old, when they took over in 2017, it took 160 years, give or take, a Great Depression and two world wars to get us there.
Yeah.
And by their own math, it's going to hit about 190 billion by the end of next year. There's your tripling. That's not my math; it's theirs. And that is, normally that would interest us political dorks and the odd accountant in the room. But where it gets very real, especially for your generation, and you mentioned my young team. I'm going to come back to them because they keep me grounded and they keep me so focused in a way I'll touch on in a sec. But it becomes real because you've now got interest on the debt as the third largest ministry of government. And that is shocking. So we pay for healthcare, we pay for education, and then basically the interest on the credit cards, not principal, just the interest. And the reason that affects everybody, especially your generation, is because that means every other expenditure after that, taking care of our senior citizens, taking care of children in need, infrastructure, the court system, policing, all of that comes after interest on debt. So you've now got it strangling the beast of government, whose this government has pushed away investment. The welcome mat for investment and economic growth is gone in British Columbia, especially because of the reckless way they did DRIPA and
Yeah.
how they did it and what's behind it. It's gone. So now you've got the pie shrinking and expenses increasing that produce no value to the population. And that's the pickle that we're in right now. So the couple of things that have to get done. First of all, every one of us in this contest right now has said you need to repeal DRIPA, you need to repeal Section 8.1 of the Interpretations Act.
Yeah.
That is not a campaign element of significance in this contest because everybody sees it. And it's not even a theoretical or academic or even legal argument. It is a practical argument.
Yeah.
I have personally received phone calls from lawyers who have friends of mine. In the course of our conversation, they go, "Oh, yeah, I got another one this morning." I go, "What are you talking about?" Another family-owned business in Abbotsford, $50 million expansion, a little manufacturing facility. You don't get much for $50 million anymore. A little expansion in Abbotsford and a family-owned business, a couple of big pieces of equipment, little shed to do it. They're not doing it. Until the uncertainty around DRIP is taken care of, they're just not investing. So
Yeah.
I've had so many phone calls like that. It's well over kind of $450 million. That's just the calls I'm getting as a matter of coffee chatter. Imagine the calls I'm not getting. Imagine the billion-dollar decisions in mining and forestry and oil and natural gas from the international players whose investment is critical
Yeah.
to our province's economy. And they're sitting there going, "I don't know what you guys are doing, but until you get it sorted out, we're out." So DRIPA and Section 8.1 of the Interpretations Act is off the table as far as we're concerned. You've got to get it repealed. That would be bill number one under a government that I lead.
How would
And then, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, how would you also push Ottawa and maybe even work with the other premiers to enshrine private property rights into
That's
like
where I was going next.
Section 35 of the
Yeah,
Constitution?
that's exactly where I was going to go next, because I
Yeah.
think, first of all, a big part of my platform, because I have a strength in economics and business development and actually creating jobs and fixing things in the economy, I look at the Western provinces and the opportunity to work together. Like, we have a lot in common with the four Western provinces. I was a minister that signed the New West Agreement with BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan back in the day, which involved labor mobility, involved getting rid of some of the inner trade barriers. But we still have so much we could do there. But we've got willing dance partners. I'm a fan of Danielle Smith's. I think the premier in Manitoba, even though he's an NDP premier, seems to be dialed into some of the realities that we need to address. And you got Premier Moe as well. So I think there's an opportunity in Western Canada to do a ton together. And frankly, I think we get along very well because we have a lot more in common than we have that's different. And they're also some of our biggest customers for the Port of Vancouver and all the activity that happens in the resources sector throughout the province. But your broader question on Ottawa is bang on. If you're going to, I have no problem at all. And I think it's actually important that we open the conversation with Ottawa and the other provinces about taking the damage that has been done by David Eby and his reckless approach to this topic. And candidly, if I may say, I think he's done more damage to legitimate reconciliation than anything else that could have happened. I think he said it back 10 years. And I think history will show that I'm right on that one. But we've got to go forward from this point. After repealing DRIPA and Section 8.1 of the Interpretations Act, I would drive a conversation with all the premiers who are willing to approach Ottawa and say, we need to make that adjustment to Section 35 of the Constitution. There's enough of us who would agree to it because it's an innocuous adjustment. We're basically saying, let's just make it clear that the foundation of every Western economy, which is private property rights, because if you don't have that, the economy doesn't exist. I mean, this is not a theoretical conversation. There isn't a democracy in history. 2,000 years of modern economics is precipitated on the understanding that you can own a piece of land. It's not complicated. Nothing else happens. So this is not a difficult argument. And I believe that British Columbia could lead the country in approaching the other provinces and say, let's make this adjustment to our constitution and add in the phrase around, except for private property rights or accepting private property rights in Section 35 of our Constitution, so we can close the door on this disastrous journey of David Eby and the NDP in British Columbia to the benefit of every province in the country.
Well said, and it's one of those foundational pillars of civilization. It's in the two or three, certainly. We talk about protecting, enshrining private property rights, and yet I don't have a problem with making light of myself recording this in a 500 to 600 square foot rental apartment. Yeah. Young families can't even buy detached homes, and the sort of the private sector is being treated with hostility right now. What specific housing reforms in your plan would help unleash development, restore the promise that hard work can still lead to a good life in BC?
Well, I think there's a few things. There's the development side, and then there's the actual residential real estate side of things. On the development side, you have got an enormous challenge with respect to development costs and fees. You've got development cost charges and community amenity charges, which is developer speak for tax, which in Vancouver is 35% of the cost of a new condo. And let's be clear, that takes like a $650,000 condo and makes it $1 million. And what happens at $1 million price tag for a new condo? All the used condos, existing, they come up in price as well. So you've got this artificial inflation in the housing market that your generation is paying the price for, that's been created over 15 to 20 years of largesse by the municipalities who are turning to the development community and purchasers of new housing stock to pay for sidewalks, fire hydrants, parks down the street, et cetera, et cetera. And that sounds good in theory, except it's been abused. And so one of the things I would do is I would legislate that any DCCs and CACs should be used for their intended purpose and not as a tax grab. And I would have that audited, possibly putting the money in a trust fund to make sure that that happens. The second thing I would do is I would cap the DCCs and CACs probably to a fixed percentage of the hard costs of building to stop this being used as a slush fund, which is driving up housing costs for a lot of people in your generation. Secondly is the approvals and the permitting process. We can deploy technology. I mean, goodness sake, artificial intelligence combined with the God-given talents and professional expertise of architects and engineers. These development permits should be showing up at City Hall pre-certified, not a 3-year dance with the development department of City Hall, which delays the building, which drives the cost up. The carrying costs on these, a $200-300 million development, which is quite small, by the way, never mind the big ones at billion plus, that adds tens of millions of dollars onto the cost of the development, which ultimately gets passed along. So let's streamline that. Third, building code reform. There's no reason that we shouldn't have a standardized building code across the province, bring it in line with the rest of Canada, and stop having developers to have extra people on staff and extra lawyers on staff and extra consultants on staff because they want to do a development in Burnaby versus Abbotsford versus Fort St. John versus Victoria. And that's how it is right now. There's no reason for it. We have to streamline that and do it as being done in the rest of Canada. And finally, on the taxation side, we have to let people invest in housing again and don't penalize British Columbians who own vacation properties. We have got right now 3 taxes that are in place in BC that were put in place for a market situation of 4 or 5 years ago that was very different than what it is today. You got the empty homes tax, the speculation tax, and the short-term rentals tax, or short-term rentals restrictions. If you eliminate all 3 of those, you're going to, first of all, you're going to increase the amount of real estate transactions being done to get that going again. But you also get to bring down the cost of housing and the existing housing tax as it exists right now. I'm getting excited about it. The challenge here, Alex, is this. It's not just the cost. It's not just the time, all of which turns into money, like the delays and permitting, et cetera. It also goes against my principles as a conservative. Because if you and your partner, spouse, whomever. Save a lot of money. You buy a house. You do really well in your endeavors. You can afford to buy a cottage, a cabin. Maybe if you live in Abbotsford and you want to have a little rental place in Vancouver, that maybe you decide you want to live in 2 days a week, 2 days a month, 2 days a year. It's not government's job
Yeah.
to tell you what to do with your after-tax money and penalize your success if you use that after-tax money to buy a second property. It's not their job. So that is a fundamental conservative principle that I think these taxes have totally ignored. It's class warfare, classic NDP maneuvering that hasn't done a thing to make housing more expensive. The only reason rentals have gone down in cost in this province is because for the first time in our history, we've got a net outflow of people. People are leaving this province after it's adjusted for immigration. That has never happened in our history.
Yeah, and so much of it seems to, I think of like the Airbnb ban as well, where I can appreciate as someone who is renting that it has some effects on the market, but so much of it seems to be a political overcorrection as well for sort of foreign real estate, foreign real estate exploration, foreign home ownership, where we went a little crazy with it for a period of time. My wife and I go through walks at night through Kitsilano and West Point Grey. We're sort of on the boundary of the neighborhoods.
Lovely area.
And a lovely area, like as beautiful as it gets, but we don't hear the sound of children. And that is just beyond peculiar. And we also have a number in our head where we reckon that 15% of the homes are vacant. You know, somebody else early on in the Trudeau years, you know, put a got their mortgage and claims it for what it is and has made a bushel on it. But, you know, a family is not growing in there. And to then turn around and punish British Columbians for if they were able to make this system work for them, to have the pied-à-terre, to have the cottage for foundational memories for their kids. Like it's completely wrong.
Well, and I would add one more thing as well on the Airbnb thing. It's a classic footnote of every NDP policy, especially economic ones, never mind the social ones. There should be an asterisk that says, seemed like a good idea at the time.
Yeah.
Right? Because here's what happens when you put in the Airbnb restrictions. You kill tourism. We have the highest hotel costs in Canada. We've had that since the Olympic Games, and we're down 1,500 hotel rooms in Vancouver alone since the Olympic Games. So how are you going to drive your tourism that drives employment in Lower Mainland and right up through Whistler? Let's talk about Kelowna. Let's talk about Penticton.
Yeah.
Highly dependent on tourism and no hotels because, remember the cost of building is so high because of what we've done in permitting and all the bureaucracy we put in place. So you've just got the whole system full of glue at the moment, and they've done nothing to help it.
When friends or family want to come out to visit, you know, they see the view, they want to join me for a run by the ocean. I don't know where to send them. Yeah. Because I'm not going to put my parents up at the Pac Rim. I work in the nonprofit sector. I can't afford such things. I video chat on a nonprofit salary, and so no, you can really feel that lack of dearth of availability on the social front. You mentioned. It's not just all fiscal mistakes. You state plainly in your article for Without Diminishment as well that decriminalization has failed so spectacularly that even its defenders are looking for the exit ramp. Yeah. What concrete steps will you take to reclaim public spaces for families, prioritize treatment and recovery over permissive supply, and how would you use police to restore order on main streets?
Oh, man, have you asked the right question?
Yeah.
I have a solid business background of fixing companies. I understand bureaucracy and all that stuff, and that's all fine and good. And I'm very proud of that experience that I can bring to this conversation. But the centerpiece of our campaign has been the announcement that we'd redevelop the Riverview lands, the 244 acres out in my neck of the woods. I live in Coquitlam. Yeah. And redevelop that into a global center of excellence for mental health, addictions recovery, and brain injury, because my doctor friends tell me there's a lot of crossover there. Yeah. But it would be a research center for sure, but it will also be housing for some of the most desperate citizens and souls who are currently bent over double with fentanyl addictions on our streets. The reason that is a centerpiece of our campaign is because everything else falls from that. When you were a very little guy, there was a mayor of New York, when he was a little more admired than he is now, named Giuliani. And Giuliani, in his early years as mayor of New York, cleaned up Times Square. If you go there now with your wife for a nice weekend in New York, it's a vibrant, relatively safe, exciting, and energetic place to be. But 25 or 30 years ago, it wasn't. There's a lot of petty theft. It was very sketchy. And Rudy Giuliani focused on one thing. It was graffiti. And if you could get the graffiti off the wall, the rest would happen. I believe today's challenge in the lower mainland of BC, I would argue most of Canada, and across the province, is untreated mental health and addiction. I honestly believe that if we step up to that travesty of what you see happening right now, we are conservatives. We do not believe in letting people suffer on the streets who are unable, not unwilling, unable to take care of themselves. And our humanity is such that we step over people now. And then when I was a little boy with my mom walking on a Saturday morning, if there was somebody on the street, my mom would stop and make sure they're okay. None of us do that now. None of us. And as conservatives, that's not okay. So I believe that we do need to take people off the street into involuntary care. Yes, that will get challenged in the courts by guys like David Eby, who wrote books on how to sue the police. Yeah. And he protested against this before as well. And I'll go right to the Supreme Court of Canada and write new laws if we need to. You cannot let people live under these conditions. But then, who shows up when you take those people off the street? The criminals. We have to step up to law enforcement. It's all connected, Alex. It's the start with untreated mental health and drug addiction. Then you go into the drug dealers and criminal policy. Absolutely get rid of safe supply and the decriminalization situation. That's got to go. It's been a miserably failed experiment. We've got to increase our policing presence, not just in the lower main of Vancouver. I mean, the theme of our campaign is restore your Main Street. The key word there is your, because this phenomena is happening in Fort St. John, where I just was, in Penticton, where I've not been able to have a beer at one of the local pubs without being accosted by people who are very, very troubled. For years now, that's been like that. So step up to the policing after you get the vulnerable off the street. With respect to the drug dealing, you have to increase your prosecutors because so many of these guys are churning through the system because we don't have the capacity to prosecute them properly. And you've got to get the Criminal Code of Canada changed on bail condition around violent crime. It's all connected. And the piece de la resistance is you've got to get rid of the regulations for your small business people. Because right now they're closing their store shops on Main Street because of drug addiction, crime, extortion. And if they could get rid of all that, you still got government who is suffocating them with red tape and taxation. It's all connected.
Yeah, and I think of it's not just a BC problem, it's a downtown Canada problem, the drugs and the decline. I mean, out here, even whether you go to Chilliwack or Nanaimo, you see it. You see business owners struggling with it. You can build a nice building, but if right next to it is a safe injection site or permissible squalor, you're not going to have families who want to frequent the area, who feel safe, hanging out on a patio. I wanted to close with Soji. The policies I wanted to make sure you touched on it as well, because the policies have become a flashpoint for many conservative parents who feel shut out of decisions about identity and orientation content in the schools. Mm-hmm. What is your clear position on parental rights, notification and opt-out provisions under a BC conservative government? Like, where does your head go with this? Where do you want to fix it?
Well, we actually sent out an email on this last night that makes it a very, very clear statement of where I stand. As I've traveled the province, obviously DRIPA comes up because it's such a flashpoint, but DRIPA is going to come and go because it's got to be repealed, and we're going to have to deal with the fallout and hopefully have an experienced leader in place who knows how to deal with the fallout, because repealing DRIPA is the easy part. It's the fallout that's going to be the challenge. But in each one of those sessions, almost without exception, I've done about 45 meet and greets now, and I would say at least 40 of them, people ask about Soji. So here's my approach. Number one, nothing matters more than the safety of a child. Number two, nobody cares about a child more than the parent. Number three, that child is in the school system for 200 odd days a year for 13 years. And therefore, the parents, if they are going to place their precious children into the school system like that, they should have some visibility into what's going on. So yesterday, we put out a very clear statement on Soji. Soji's got to go. It's got to go. And the principle around that, I mean, you start about where I start with this whole thing, but we have to return control to parents, right? There's no curriculum decision regarding children that should be made without meaningful parental input, and that'll end the moment I become the premier. Secondly, we have to mandate age-appropriate content. Any classroom discussion around sexuality has to follow a specific and approved curriculum, developmentally appropriate, consistently delivered, and transparent to parents. And third, we have to protect elementary school children. Now, is it realistic that we're going to have young adults coming out of grade 12 who think that everybody's just like them? No, of course not. There's going to be families with two moms and two dads and all that stuff. That's a part of our reality today. But Young children should not be exposed to advanced topics in sexuality at school. Full stop. It's common sense and has been missing from Victoria for far too long. So whether Soji was a deliberate social engineering experiment or even a well-intentioned policy gone wrong, the answer is the same. The vast majority of children do not need protection from their parents. They need the protection of their parents. And the last point on this is very important. As conservatives, we don't really care who you love. It's not our place. We don't care. What we do care about, like we don't care about who you pray to, if you pray, when you pray. What we care about is that at 2 o'clock in the morning, nobody gets beat up in a parking lot at 2 o'clock in the morning because of the color of their skin, their religion, their ethnicity, who they love, or their gender. That's not okay. As conservatives, we're fierce defenders of individual rights and freedoms of liberties. We can do that. We can believe that and stay true to that absolute belief and still say that the deployment of this thing called SOGI was an experiment gone bad and it needs to be repealed.
Yeah, regardless of whether it was that road was paved with good intentions,
Yeah.
there can be a clear dividing line there. You can be compassionate on one front, but know that there are limits with children on the other. Iain Black terrifically articulated conservative principles culturally as well. We appreciate your time and best of luck on the campaign trail.
And congratulations to you and your team for what you're doing. I think you're an important voice. I love your work. I'm a big fan. Those who are watching, subscribe, support. Thanks so much, Alex, to you and your team.
Amazing. We're just doing our part. So thank you, sir.
You bet. Take care.